USS Portland, the lead ship of her class of cruiser, was the first ship of the United States Navy named after the city of Portland, Maine. Launched in 1932, she saw a number of training and goodwill cruisers in the interwar period. In World War II, she saw extensive service beginning at the 1942 Battle of Coral Sea, where she escorted the aircraft carrier Yorktown and picked up survivors from the sunken carrier Lexington. She screened for Yorktown again in the Battle of Midway, picking up her survivors as well. She then supported the carrier Enterprise during the initial phase of the Waddle Kennel campaign later that year, and was torpedoed during the naval Battle of Waddle Kennel. The torpedo inflicted heavy damage which put her out of action for 6 months as she was repaired in Sydney, Australia and later San Diego, California. Returning to action in mid-1943, she saw action in many of the major campaigns of the Pacific War, conducting shore bombardments in support of campaigns at the Aleutian Islands, Gilbert and Marshall Islands, Mariana Islands, and New Guinea. She was involved in the October 1944 Battle of Leyte Gulf, engaging Japanese ships in the decisive Battle of Suragawa Strait. She then conducted shore bombardments at Lingayen Gulf and Corregidor Island, and in 1945 supported landings during the Battle of Okinawa until the end of the war. Following World War II, Portland accepted the Japanese surrender in the Caroline Islands and then undertook several Operation Magic Carpet cruises to bring U.S. troops home. She was decommissioned in 1946 and scrapped by 1962. In her extensive service she accrued 16 battle stars, making her one of the most decorated ships in the U.S. fleet. Design and construction. Portland was the lead ship of the third class of treaty cruisers to be constructed by the United States Navy following the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922. Following the 2 vessels of the Pensacola class ordered in 1926 and the 6 vessels of the Northampton class ordered in 1927. Ordered for the U.S. Navy in fiscal year 1930. Portland was originally designated as a light cruiser because of her thin armor, and given the hull classification symbol CA-33. She was reclassified a heavy cruiser because of her 8-inch guns, with the symbol CA-33 on 1 July 1931. In accordance with the London Naval Treaty, Portland was designed for a standard displacement of 10,258 long tons, and a full load displacement of 12,755 long tons. However, Portland only displaced 9,800 long tons when completed. In 1943, a light tripod was added forward of the second funnel on the ship, and a prominent fire control director was installed aft. Her 4 Parsons GT-geared turbines each drove a propeller shaft using steam provided by Yarrow boilers. Portland's power plant generated 107,000 shaft horsepower and she had a designed maximum speed of 32 knots. The ship reached, however, 32.7 knots on sea trials. She rolled badly until fitted with bilge keels. Portland was designed for a range of 10,000 nautical miles at 15 knots. The ship was armed with a main battery of 9 Mark Chapter 9 8.55 caliber guns arrayed in 3 triple mounts, of super-firing pair forward and 1 aft. She was armed with 8 5.25 caliber guns for anti-aircraft defense, and she also had 2 two F3-pounder Hotchkiss saluting guns. In 1945, her anti-aircraft defenses were upgraded, receiving 24 Bofors 40mm guns which were arranged in 4 quad mounts and 4 twin mounts. Portland was also upgraded with 17 Lycon 20mm cannons. She was originally designed with 1 inch of armor for deck and side protection, but during construction her armor was increased. As completed, the ship was protected with 3.25 inches of belt armor which increased to 5 inches around the magazines. Her armor was between 2 inches and 5.75 inches thick on the transverse bulkheads, while armor on her main deck was 2.5 inches thick. Armor on her barbets was 1.5 inches thick. Armor on her gun houses was 2.5 inches thick, and armor on her conning tower was 1.25 inches thick. Additionally, the Portland-class cruisers were designed with space to be outfitted as fleet flagships, with accommodations for an admiral and his staff to operate. The class also featured 2 aircraft catapult amidships, and she could carry 4 aircraft which were stored in a hangar. Her total crew complement varied, with a regular designed crew complement of 848, a wartime complement of 952, and a complement 1,229 when the cruiser was operating as a fleet flagship. Portland was laid down by Bethlehem Steel at its Quincy shipyard on the 17th of February 1930. The machinery was provided by the builders. Portland was launched on the 21st of May 1932 and commissioned on the 23rd of February 1933. She was the first ship named for the city of Portland, Maine, and sponsored by the daughter of Ralph D. Brooks of Portland, and with Captain Herbert F. Leary as her first commander. Her sailors would later nickname her Sweet Pea. Service history. Departing Boston on the 1st of April 1933, the cruiser arrived Gravesend Bay, New York late in the day on the 3rd of April. The next evening, she was dispatched on her first assignment to the scene of the airship Akron, which had crashed at sea. 36 minutes after receiving the message, she was underway and en route to the crash site. She was the first naval vessel on scene, and began coordinating the search and rescue effort with other ships arriving. In spite of her efforts, 73 were killed in the crash, including Admiral William Moffett, Chief of the Bureau of Aeronautics. Portland steamed from San Diego, California on the 2nd of October 1935 along with Houston, which was carrying President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The president spent much of his trip fishing with his party. After visiting Panama and several other ports, the 2 ships steamed to Charleston, South Carolina, where the president disembarked. Portland spent the remainder of the interwar era with the Scouting Force, Cruiser Division 5 and later in the United States Pacific Fleet conducting peacetime training and a number of goodwill missions. She crossed the equator for the first time on the 20th of May 1936 during fleet maneuvers. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December 1941, Portland was 2 days away, en route to Midway Atoll as part of a carrier group escorting aircraft carrier Lexington. From December 1941 to the 1st of May 1942, she operated between the West Coast, Hawaii, and Fiji on patrol. Battle of Coral Sea. Portland joined Task Force 17, commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Jack Fletcher and centered around the carrier Yorktown, escorted by Portland as well as cruisers Astoria and Chester, plus the destroyers Hammin, Anderson, Perkins, Morris, Russell, and Simpson, Oilen, Yosho, and Tipcano. TF-17 departed Tongatabu on the 27th of April en route to the Coral Sea. On the morning of the 1st of May, TF-17 joined with Task Force 11 about 300 nmi northwest of New Caledonia. TF-17 completed refueling the next day, but TF-11 reported that they would not be finished fueling until the 4th of May. Fletcher elected to take TF-17 northwest towards the Louisiades. At 1700 on the 3rd of May, Fletcher was notified that a force of Japanese troops had been sighted at Tulungi the day before, approaching the southern Solomons. TF-17 changed course and proceeded at 27 knots towards Waddle Canal to launch airstrikes against the Japanese forces at Tulungi the next morning. On the 4th of May, from a position 100 nmi south of Waddle Canal, TF-17 launched airstrikes against Japanese forces off Tulungi after recovering its aircraft late in the evening of the 4th of May. TF-17 retired towards the south. The next morning, TF-17 rendezvoused with TF-11 and Task Force 44 at a predetermined point 320 nmi south of Waddle Canal. Prompted by reports the Japanese would attack Port Moresby, the force moved to the Louisiades to engage the Japanese the next day. Portland was assigned to Task Group 17.2 under Rear Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid together with cruisers Minneapolis, New Orleans, Astoria, Chester, and 5 destroyers from Destroyer Squadron 1. She screened for Yorktown throughout the operation, including during Japanese air attacks on the 2 carriers on the 8th of May. Following the battle, she was to escort the damaged Lexington, but after fires on that carrier became uncontrollable, she was abandoned and sunk. Portland took on 722 of her survivors. She suffered no casualties herself, though at least 4 of her sailors were transferred to the Neosho shortly before the battle and were lost when the ship was sunk. Battle of Midway. After brief repairs at Tonga-Taboo, Portland took on a new commander, Captain Lawrence Dubose. She then steamed for Pearl Harbor escorting Yorktown, before heading to Midway Atoll to set a trap for Japanese forces attacking there. On the 4th of June, after dive bombers from carriers Yorktown and Enterprise had sunk 3 Japanese carriers, aircraft from Japanese carrier Hiryu responded with an attack on Yorktown that afternoon. Portland was to her port as providing anti-aircraft defense along with cruisers Pensacola and Vincennes. A Japanese air attack came at 1400 and another after 1630, and Yorktown was struck several times with torpedoes. With increasing damage, the carrier was abandoned and its survivors picked up by 5 destroyers and then transferred to Portland. In all, 2,046 of Yorktown's crew transferred to the cruiser. She then steamed toward Pearl Harbor and met the submarine tender Fulton and transferred the Yorktown survivors aboard her on the 6th of June. During the 7th of June, she searched for downed naval aviators and the next day joined the group of carrier Saratoga. They steamed for the Aleutian Islands to counter a Japanese force but were recalled to Pearl Harbor 2 days later. Waddle Canal campaign. Portland accompanied the invasion fleet to Waddle Canal, escorting Enterprise. She remained off the coast protecting the landings at Tulungi and Waddle Canal from 7 to 9 August. In this duty, she missed the Battle of Savo Island and withdrew 2 days later following Enterprise. She then remained in the area to support the Waddle Canal operations and to protect communications lines for the attacking forces. Remaining with Enterprise, she later participated in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. On the 24th of August, she was posted to air defense to the port of Enterprise, and though she and her sisters were able to down a number of Japanese aircraft, the carrier was hit at 1834. She continued to protect the carrier through the 25th of August, when Allied forces prevented reinforcement of Japanese units in the Solomons by a large naval armada under Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Following the battle, she escorted Enterprise to Pearl Harbor and was then ordered on a secret mission to the Gilbert Islands to conduct a raid on Tarawa with light cruiser San Juan. She took aboard Rear Admiral Marlon S. Tisdale and was designated Task Unit 16.9.1. Between 1410 and 1451 on the 15th of October she attacked Japanese ships near the island, damaging a transport and a destroyer and suffering one damaged aircraft before she withdrew and rejoined the Enterprise task group near the Solomons. She then steamed south to take part in the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands as one of the escorts for Enterprise. The carrier came under heavy air attack at 10:12 on the 24th of October, and Portland suffered her first wartime damage as one of her 1.1-INCH guns exploded in firing, and again when one of her AA guns depressed too low and damaged the splinter shield, injuring 19 officers and enlisted men. In heavy fighting, Enterprise was hit once, but Portland and the task group shot down several aircraft. At 11:53 the bridge lost control of steering, and before it could regain control, a Japanese submarine was spotted. The submarine struck Portland with 3 torpedoes, but all 3 did not detonate, likely because the submarine had fired too close and they had no time to arm. 2 weeks later, she participated in the naval Battle of Waddle Kennel from 12 to 15 November, which resulted in heavy damage to both forces but broke up the determined Japanese effort to disrupt the landing of 6,000 American troops on Waddle Kennel, to bombard Henderson Field, and to land 7,000 reinforcements of their own. At the outbreak of the battle, Portland was escorting a convoy traveling to Waddle Kennel from New Caledonia as part of Task Force 67. After a 4-day journey they arrived and began to offload supplies on the 12th of November and were countered by a Japanese air attack of 46 aircraft. At night, she was among a force of 5 cruisers and 8 destroyers under Daniel J. Callahan which steamed to counter an approaching Japanese force. They spotted a Japanese force of 2 battleships, 1 cruiser and 11 destroyers and immediately opened fire, sinking the Japanese destroyer Akatsuki. Shortly thereafter, Portland was struck by a torpedo fired by either the destroyer Inazuma or the destroyer Ikazuchi at 1:58, causing heavy damage to her stern. The torpedo struck the starboard side, which blew off both inboard propellers, jammed the rudder 5 degrees to starboard, and jammed her number 3 turret in train and elevation. A 4-degree list was quickly corrected by shifting ballast, but the steering problem could not be overcome and the ship was forced to steam in circles to starboard. The blast disrupted her steering column, forcing her to steer in a circle. At the end of her first circle, she fired on Japanese battleship Hyatt with her forward turrets. The Japanese ship returned fire, but all salvos passed over the cruiser. In the 4 6-gun salvos returned by Portland, she succeeded in starting fires in the Japanese ship. At dawn, she was one of 3 U.S. ships still too damaged to withdraw on her own power. Then again at 6:30, still circling, Portland opened fire on the abandoned hulk of Japanese destroyer Udachi at a range of 6 miles. After the 6th salvo, Udachi exploded, rolled over, and sank within 5 minutes. She was eventually able to correct the steering problem and withdraw on her own power. She later received a meritorious unit commendation for her actions in the battle. She suffered 18 killed, 17 wounded in the battle. With the assistance of Higgins boats, a YP, and a tug, Portland anchored at Toolungi on the 14th of November. For that, she was towed to Sydney, Australia by the tugboat Navajo and escorted by the destroyers Meaden'Zane for preliminary repairs prior to overhaul in the United States. She arrived at Sydney the 30th of November but did not tend to dry dock until the 24th of December after Chester and New Orleans were repaired. During this time the crew was given extended shore leave. 2 of the ship's sailors died in accidents during this leave. She left Australia after preliminary repairs, escorted by destroyer HMAS Warramunga. Following short stops at Samoa and Pearl Harbor, the ship arrived at Mare Island Navy Yard on the 3rd of March 1943. 1944 After operational training in Southern Californian waters, Portland steamed for the Aleutians late in May, arriving on the 11th of June and bombarding Kiska on the 26th of July. After covering a reconnaissance landing on Little Kiska on the 17th of August, she called at Pearl Harbor on the 23rd of September, there to San Francisco in early October, then back to Pearl Harbor in mid-October. From November 1943 to February 1944, Portland participated in the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaigns. She bombarded Tarawa on the 20th of November, supporting landings there for several days. She was lightly damaged by a friendly depth charge when a nearby destroyer erroneously detected a Japanese submarine. In December 1943 she moved to the Marshall Islands escorting the new Essex-class carrier Lexington. While Lexington came under air attack, none of the Japanese planes came within range of Portland and she did not open fire. She returned to Pearl Harbor on the 25th of December and went into dry dock to repair her rudder and propellers. After repairs, she joined Task Group 51 under Rear Admiral Harry W. Hill for an attack on Darrett, steaming for that island on the 23rd of January and arriving the 30th of January. After shelling the island for 30 minutes, it was discovered no Japanese were ashore. She then moved to support operations on Eniwetok Atoll on the 8th of February, providing shore bombardment on Parry Island ahead of landings which took place on the 19th of February. She then screened carriers conducting airstrikes at Palau, Jap, Ulithi, and Woolai between the 30th of March and the 1st of April. She then joined with a carrier force assigned to cover the landings around Hollandia and Tanamera on New Guinea, which took place from 21 to 24 April. She steamed northward with the carrier force and struck Truk with 5 other cruisers and destroyers. Portland then bombarded Sattar when in the Noma group. Following this series of operations, Portland returned to Mare Island for a more extensive overhaul, which was completed in August. She returned to the Western Pacific for shore bombardments of Peleliu from 12 to 14 September. The cruiser supported the landing on Peleliu on the 15th of September, providing artillery to support the advance of Allied forces. She provided gunfire support at Peleliu through the 29th of September, and then steamed for Seadler Harbor, Manus Island in the Admiralties. Battle of Leyte Gulf. Portland next joined Cruiser Division 4 for the next major campaign against the Philippines. She arrived off Leyte on the 17th of October, entering the Gulf the next day, and began 2 days of shore bombardments to prepare for the troop landings there. On the night of the 24th of October, a strong Japanese force consisting of 2 battleships, 1 heavy cruiser, and 4 destroyers headed for Suragawa Strait with the apparent intent of raiding shipping in Leyte Gulf. The Japanese force advanced in rough column up the narrow strait during darkness, but was met with a large U. force of cruisers, destroyers and battleships, including Portland. She and her sisters steamed across the top of the strait, crossing the T of the Japanese force. The Japanese were first met by PT boats, then in succession by 3 coordinated destroyer-torpedo attacks, and finally by devastating gunfire from American battleships and cruisers disposed across the northern end of the strait. Portland took the Japanese cruiser Mogami under fire, scoring 3 hits on her at 4:02, striking the compass platform in AA Defense Center. She continued firing on the Mogami for 10 minutes. She continued to fire on the stranded Mogami until 5:30, striking several hits, including on the ship's bridge. The Battle of Suragawa Strait was a decisive defeat for the Japanese force, with most of its ships being destroyed. 1945. From the 3rd of January to the 1st of March 1945, Portland participated in the operations at Lingayen Gulf and Corregidor, arriving off Lingayen Gulf on the 5th of January, and bombarding the vicinity of Cape Bolinao. She entered the Gulf the same day and commenced bombardment of the eastern shore, but discontinued immediately when a large wave of Japanese kamikaze planes approached. Portland entered Manila Bay on the 15th of February, and bombarded the south shore of Corregidor in preparation for landings there. She returned to Leyte Gulf on the 1st of March for repairs and replenishment, having seen 5 months of continuous action. From the 26th of March to the 20th of April, she conducted shore bombardments of Okinawa in support of the Allied landings during the Okinawa War campaign. Portland endured 24 air raids, shot down 4 Japanese aircraft, and assisted in downing 2 others. For the 8th of May to the 17th of June, she supported ground forces on Okinawa, providing artillery support for ground forces, departing on the 17th of June for maintenance at Leyte before returning to Buckner Bay on the 6th of August, where she remained conducting shore bombardments until the end of the war. Post-war, with the termination of hostilities, Portland was designated flagship of Vice Admiral George D. Murray, Commander Mariana Islands, who was to accept the surrender of the Carolines. The ship steamed to Truk Atoll, and the Murray, acting for Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, accepted the formal capitulation of the senior Japanese military and civilian officials in ceremonies aboard Portland. She was then selected for Operation Magic Carpet duty, and returned to Pearl Harbor from 21 to 24 September, embarking 600 troops for transportation to the United States. She crossed the Panama Canal on the 8th of October and arrived at Portland, Maine for Navy Day celebrations on the 27th of October. She then conducted 2 transatlantic crossings in November and December, bringing troops home from the European theater. She reported on the 11th of March 1946 to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard for inactivation and assignment to the Reserve Fleet. She decommissioned at Philadelphia Navy Yard on the 12th of July 1946 and was maintained in the United States Reserve Fleet. While she was identified as one of the few ships that fought through the entire war and not missed any major battle, no attempt was made to save her as a museum ship at either Portland, Maine, or Portland, Oregon. She was struck from the Navy list on the 1st of March 1959 and sold to Union Minerals and Alloys Corp. in New York on the 6th of October. She was scrapped at Wainwright Shipyard in Panama City, Florida during 1961 and 1962. Her tripod mast was preserved at Fort Allen Park, Portland. She received 16 battle stars for World War II service, making her among the most decorated U.S. ships of World War II.